Look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
Welcome back to you, and happy Thanksgiving week. I am meteorologist Marcus Bailey here for Weather Weekly, and appreciate your time here on this holiday week. Hopefully it's a good one for you. Got a good episode. If you were listening to last week, we kind of previewed ahead. We're going to have Stephen Deanna come and join us again, talk about another historical November outbreak, the anniversary of which is happening this week, so stay tuned for that. Usually we do weather headlines here, but I don't have a whole lot really going on across much of the country. It's so quiet. It has been. And everything kind of on schedule in terms of just kind of your typical mid to late November weather pattern. The tropics, extremely quiet. Nothing brewing in the Atlantic, the Eastern Pacific, or the Central Pacific. And really the big story is kind of just a pattern flip that's been kind of going back and forth. The typical things that you usually see in November, going from warm to cold and starting to make that full-on transition to the winter months, which we will be starting to feel here in a little bit. And of course, we'll have that look at the forecast, including the Thanksgiving holiday coming up at the end of the podcast. So we don't have much for you here to start things off, but we do have a good chunk of our podcast here talking about an historic tornado outbreak that happened in the month of November. And this one's going to be a little bit different compared to last week's when we talked about the November 17th outbreak and really only impacted a couple of states. It was significant, no doubt, in the terms of how many tornadoes for both Illinois and Indiana. And the strength of some of the tornadoes from that day. This one was a much more widespread event. Indiana included in several states with some very high magnitude tornadoes on that day. It was a 3-day event, November 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of 1992. So we'll bring back meteorologist Stephen Deanna, my colleague. We're going to talk about that historic severe weather outbreak in the late fall months. That's coming up next here on Weather Weekly.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
All right, it is episode number 41 of Weather Weekly here. Thanks for joining us. This is going to kind of piggyback off of last week's episode when we talk about a pretty historical tornado outbreak that happened in November. That was November 17th. This one also impacted Indiana. We kind of previewed it in last week's episode. And it was kind of a 3-day event here, if you will. Back in November, the heart of it was November 22nd, which ironically, we're recording this here. I'm joined by meteorologist Stephen Deanna again. And Stephen, welcome back. And this one's interesting here because, last week, we talked about, it was really Illinois and Indiana that got hammered. This was a very large event that ended up happening in late November.
Yeah, and hey, Marcus, thank you for having me back on the podcast. Great stuff, man. Always love talking about the stuff with you guys. Great to break down stuff like this. Yeah, this is going to be a good one, folks. Definitely stay tuned with this one. This one's quite interesting, especially for several reasons. But yeah, this was a widespread outbreak, a 3-day outbreak that had quite a bit of tornadoes. It's sometimes referred to as the widespread outbreak. as was the 1974 super outbreak, wasn't it? Of course, devastating 3-day outbreak that struck the eastern and midwestern United States. Exceptionally long-lived, geographically large outbreak produced 95 tornadoes over a 41-hour period, making it one of the longest-lasting and largest outbreaks ever recorded in the U.S. Now, Marcus, here's first of several interesting things about this outbreak.
Okay.
Published studies of the outbreak have indicated the possibility of maybe even more tornadoes, or maybe just slightly less. Some numbers come up of like 92, 94, even 146, 143. Higher numbers reflecting no. So yeah, there's a little bit of incompleteness possibly with this outbreak, which I find interesting, actually.
Well, I mean, and it's before we get too deep into it. I mean, so we're going back to 1992, right? And while that doesn't seem all that long ago, you have to think about how much technology has changed since 1992 to now, in being able to track tornadoes. On the TV, at least on the TV perspective, before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the day, they certainly didn't have the kind of in-depth radar tracking tools that we have now, where we can like get down to street level and see where that rotation is, or the possible of a TVS, or a TDS. It doesn't surprise me that there could be more than what they already have recorded officially on the books for that day, considering that while it was the 90s, the technology just still wasn't quite as good as what we have now.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point as well with the TV side, of course, even looking at radar back then, not as high resolution.
Right.
Nowhere near close to it.
That's right.
And yeah, tornado numbers are much lower, especially when you get towards the middle of the 1900s and further beyond that, for several different things. Technology, now you have more spotters in the field these days. That's one of the bigger differences as well. But yeah, this outbreak, really big across the board. 26 fatalities, over 600 injuries, and over $300 million in damage. 1992's numbers. So imagine what it's like. One's number is probably well over $1 billion.
Sure.
But here's the thing, though. 92 was a very weird year.
Okay.
I wanted to kind of talk about this real quick before we go on the outbreak.
Sure.
Very, very slow start to the tornado season. We're just also coming off of the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines in July of 91.
Okay.
And what this ended up doing, it caused a much cooler than average year for a lot of places across the country. Even, of course, here in Indiana, of course, the coolest Indy 500 happened. It was in the 50s only. And then, boom, once you hit June, very active across the board. Mid-June featured, of course, the tornado outbreak across much of the central and eastern part of the United States. You had the F5 in southwest Minnesota, which was absolutely ridiculous. There was a storm on it, and it leveled everything in Chandler and Lake Wilson. Miraculously, only one person was killed in that tornado, but still one person died. But that just led way to a pretty active go-around in mid-June. Things kind of tapered down a little bit, but of course, by the fall, things were getting active again. So that leads us to late November. So the start of it was in Texas. You had a system basically, and I pulled up a few articles, of course. One of them, Space City Rewind. This started up, it looks like, in 2016, basically around the 24th anniversary of it. And here's the interesting thing about it, too. November 1992, here typed up by Matt Lanza, I want to give credit there, represents the benchmark tornado outbreak for greater Houston. 6 tornadoes were confirmed in the Houston area that day, including a rather rare F4, and of course back then we used the F scale for tornadoes.
Right.
Now we G scale. So I'm going to use the F scale today just to let you guys know, just to keep it, of course, natural. F4 tornado in Channelview. Channelview is just on the eastern outskirts of Houston, which is way too close to a town like that.
Sure.
Houston today, last time I recall, was like 2 million. Which is just...
Yeah, it's a large city, yes.
Oh, yeah. Several other tornadoes spun up elsewhere across southeastern Texas for a total of 14 in the state. At one time, 3 were on the ground simultaneously in Harris County. Miraculously, nobody was killed, But of course, as we progress later on, there would be some deadly tornadoes. So basically, you had what was going on at the time, you had a pressure system in the Great Lakes of a trailing cold front that was stationary over East Texas, connected back west to another surface low in Central Texas. This low in Texas would become the focal point for what was about to come. Basically, it would trail up into Illinois and, of course, opened up a wide warm sector, and everything kind of popped up over the next 41 hours. So, yeah, southeast Texas was hit kind of hard. Let's talk about, I kind of mentioned about a couple other tornadoes that happened with that one. So you have one northeast of Foster to west of Deco. That's in Harris County, 25. And some of these tornadoes were really long track markets. I mean, you're talking strong, rare tornadoes, long track ones in an area that doesn't quite see strong tornadoes like this.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, you can get tornadoes around here, especially during hurricane season. But for Houston to see this, it's rare.
Sure.
Not too often in your lifetime you see this. But you had an F3 southeast of Huffman to west of Rye. That's a 32-mile path length. You had a tornado that almost hit the campus of Rice University in Houston. I mean, you're talking these supercells pretty much going over the overall city. And I just saw a quick radar image of it yesterday, of course, that post about the outbreak on Twitter. And it's just rather crazy to see cells like this going over Houston, because you're just thinking, oh, geez.
Yeah.
Of course, you kind of have a sinking feeling, especially when you see storms like that move over big areas or big towns and whatnot. But thankfully, nobody was killed. Now, progressing into the nighttime, of course, you had more storms fire off. And this was an impressive event. Of course, when you're in the southeast, November, December, January, you got your tornado season going in the southeast in Dixie Alley. And so you have the Gulf of Mexico right next to you. So you're going to have no problem getting warm, moist air. And then all you need is the winds aloft and some kind of front around to trigger. And boom, there you go. You're going to have probably more of a heightened risk of severe weather more often than not.
Right.
So you had several intense tornadoes in Louisiana. I'm just seeing here every tornado except for one was intense in Louisiana, like F2s and F3s. You had two tornadoes that hit Catahoula Parish. In general, the second one was a 38-mile path length of F3 intensity. No fatalities in Louisiana. But when we get into Mississippi, this is where things got a little out of control in Mississippi. So you had moisture-rich tropical air that covered the southeastern United States over a wide area from Texas eastward to Georgia and eventually northward to the Ohio River Valley. We'll get to Indiana when we get to that. I'm kind of going to do things a little bit in order with this day, overall day. So tremendous energy was released in this unseasonably warm and unstable air mass as that low I was talking about entered Texas from the west. Of course, resulted in a 3-day severe weather outbreak. Now I'm on NWS Jackson site. Of course, that was unusually widespread and intense. Covered 13 states. It's rather large. Let's see, we go through here. All right, so basically, Mississippi was dealt the hardest blow during this tornado outbreak. You had 15 fatalities. 10 of them were in Rankin County, 2 in Webster County, 1 in Leake, and 1 in Choctaw, 1 in Kemper County, and 269 injuries. This is just a little bit of the summary of it. I'll kind of go into details on both the main tornadoes from Mississippi, which were rather impressive, unfortunately. Nearly 300 homes were destroyed and over 700 damaged. 21 counties declared disaster areas. Nearly all the damage occurred with 2 storm cells that entered South Mississippi, tracked northeast into central and northeast Mississippi. So you're talking 2 very impressive cells, Marcus, in the nighttime hours.
Oh, yeah. That's rough.
Yeah. Awful stuff. Basically, with the 2 main tornadoes, go ahead and find section on it. The most impressive tornado, this whole outbreak ended up happening in this duration right here, this time frame. This tornado was on the ground for a staggering, I can't believe I'm saying this number, for a nighttime tornado like this. There's not many that I know about that have done something like this. This tornado was on the ground for 2.5 hours.
Wow.
At night.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow, indeed. 128-mile path length. This basically tracked through areas such as Hopewell, Florence, Pine, Tree, Weir, basically counties such as, there's several counties that it tracked through, like Rankin County especially was hit hard. It actually ended up moving just east of Jackson, Mississippi. It almost hit Jackson. Ugh. Can you imagine if that tornado would have hit Jackson?
In the middle of the night with something that size, that would have been an absolute catastrophe.
Yes, it would have been. I did realize how close it came to Jackson, actually. It's scary. It entered Rankin County, struck the south side of Florence, moved to a mobile home park. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and to your point, while you're hitting that here, I was just kind of searching around, and I found on tornadotalk.com,
Yes.
there is a write-up of many of the fatalities that happened from that event. And you'd already kind of brushed on just in the Jackson office area. And Rankin County had the vast majority of the fatalities, at least in Mississippi that day. The majority of them that happened in Rankin County, and really as a whole in this whole event, which you're going to talk about the other states where there were fatalities, all said there were more fatalities from mobile homes for people in mobile homes than any other place combined.
That's wow. And
and it goes to what we always preach, right? You and I have said it numerous times on this podcast that mobile home is just not a safe place to be. It's not. A modular home, a mobile home, you need to have a site-built home to be able to withstand that type of destruction. And even then, you need to hopefully maybe even have a basement or pretty sturdy structure and get in the center part of your house. But a mobile home is just never going to provide you any protection at all.
Exactly. It's always important to make sure that you know what the time frame of severe weather is, and then okay, what's my action point? Where do I need to go? And it's sad to see that we had some fatalities like this overnight, because it's like you're asleep and you don't know what's going on.
That's right. Yep.
And it is a recipe for disaster. But always make sure, folks, that especially when you're talking, this tornado was on the ground from 11:27 p.m. to 2 a.m., which is unfathomable.
Sure.
The max width of this tornado was a half mile wide. Like you said, the Rankin County was hit the hardest. For example, here, I'm kind of skimming through this kind of quickly so I don't kind of hang on to this tornado too long. You had large and well-built brick homes were destroyed in the East Haven subdivision of Brandon, Mississippi, including a massive, well-constructed brick mansion that was completely leveled, in which 4 people were killed there. 60 homes were destroyed in Rankin County alone. Yeah, and that's where it attained peak intensity at. So this was just an incredible tornado. It kind of blows my mind how something like that happens for a long period of time. But of course, you have the strong dynamics. Usually, when the sun goes down, you don't have that unstable air. You usually don't have that wet, warm, moist air kind of funneling into the storms. But with this, it was just so incredible that the storms were able to attain such intensity for a long period of time. That's why stuff like this happened. You had another impressive tornado, which is also an F4. That one was rated F4. The other one I want to talk about real quick was rated F4. This was on the ground for 40 miles. It was on the ground from 12:14 a.m. to 1:14 a.m. And it was a mile wide. You had a couple of very large tornadoes in this outbreak. Let's kind of see if we got any info on this other F4. I'm sure there is a little bit. So this one did not kill anyone, but it moved through Smith, Jasper, Newton counties. It tore through part of the Beanville National Forest and sparsely populated areas, thankfully, but it still destroyed some things. But again, no fatalities, which was good to hear. Most of the damage was in Smith County near Silverena. There, a large church was leveled and 90 homes were destroyed. In Jasper County, some mobile homes were destroyed as well. Yeah, quite a lot of destruction overnight, and just really sad that it resulted in 15 fatalities in Mississippi. So after the destruction in Mississippi, which was just, again, incredible. And here's the thing, again, like I said, tornadoes like this are rare overnight. You don't hear about stuff like this very often.
Right.
I mean, I'm trying to do an analog in my head of tornadoes like this at night, and not many come to mind. I mean, not many at all. Like, you could say the one from Guin, Alabama, maybe from 1974. That one was on the ground for like 100 miles, and it happened at like very late at night. yeah, it's just incredible with how you get stuff like this.
Well, I think it goes to show, and look, there's a lot that kind of goes into it, right? But when you get to this time of year, it can be a bit of a powder keg, and I mean that by saying that it doesn't take much for severe weather to happen. You don't need some of those higher dynamics that you typically would maybe need in the spring. You could have some lower capes and you're going to have some pretty nasty weather. You could have a lot of things. It just doesn't happen quite as much. So your threshold is a little bit lower this time of year, and to what you said, all the things that you needed were just at peak elevations to make it really exponentially even worse off that day for the areas that did see all the severe weather.
Exactly, and you always have to be ready for stuff like that, because it doesn't, like you said, Marcus, does not take much for stuff to go off, but back then in the day, again, warning lead time and whatnot, and just general warning was a bit less because of just how technology was back then and overall detection of events. I mean, of course, back then too, we were working hard, and I know by 99, for instance, warning lead time in general, even with like just talking about warnings in general, was about on average 3-4 minutes. But of course, back then too, it's hard to get the message out to people who aren't even awake. Well,
and to your point, I think that's important too, because even in the early 90s, again, it goes back to technology. We don't have smartphones in 1992.
Exactly.
So we're not getting alerted by any, WEA, the WEA system, where your cell phone is letting you know that there is an emergency based on your GPS signal. Back then, we also didn't have warning-based polygons, right? So, now when you get a tornado warning, a severe thunderstorm warning, it doesn't include an entire county. It will include parts of a county, if need be. Now it's like you get in 1992. If they issued a warning for, let's say, Marion County, it was all of Marion County. Let's say that there was, and we'll talk about this, one of the tornadoes impacted and did damage to the north side of Indianapolis.
Yes.
That day there was a tornado warning that went out. Current technology would have probably put a polygon for the northern part of Marion County that day.
Yes.
But the southern part would not be under that, so let's say like around the Southport area or Beech Grove, that area may not have been anyway. Back then, though, the entire county was under that. So maybe there's some sense of, and the big reason why the Weather Service wanted to do that was kind of to limit the false reporting. Because, there are some counties in and around the United States that are really, really, really big. So if you're warning for a tornado, you want to be as specific as possible in those big counties, because some of those counties you could be an hour drive away from where the tornado is happening. It's a long way away, right? So people will just kind of get into that, well, we've had a million warnings here before and nothing's ever happened kind of thing.
Right.
So there might have been that kind of sense. But I think to your point, too, especially when you're specifically talking about what happened in the Deep South, Mississippi, which you've been talking about, happening overnight. How are these people getting their warnings? Unless they're sleeping with their television on and it's on a local station, I don't know if there's a way that they're actually going to get that warning outside of maybe hearing a storm siren, which we have said time and time again is not a reliable source to wake you up and warn you of severe weather. So, there was a host of problems there that you run into when you're talking about an overnight event in November when people have their guard down when it comes to severe weather, and really no excellent ways of defense if you're sleeping. And so that's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it is. And it's great, though, that we've come a long way since then, of course. there's always some things we can work on, maybe. It just depends on the situation. But, of course, too, like with the TV standpoint, too, of course, back then, you basically, if you had heavy weather, I'm sure a lot of time the reception would be spotty or whatnot, of course, with the interference of a storm and whatnot. So you have a whole host of problems with the whole thing of getting the warning. You sometimes be lucky to even get a phone call from someone that might know what's going on, but even then too, they probably don't know. So it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. It was definitely a bit harder back then, but again, thankfully now though, we have definitely excelled with saving more and more lives each year. Again, though, we can always do something a little better in certain areas, of course, and with the messenger, not only with the messenger, but also with the person who's receiving the message itself. But yeah, this outbreak took off on the 22nd, especially. And it's going to move, basically, we're going to move into Alabama, Georgia. And I'm kind of going to talk about, let me figure out the time. I'm going to quickly look at the timeline again for Indiana, because Indiana and Georgia were happening around the same time. Okay, we'll do Georgia first.
Okay.
We'll do Alabama, Georgia, and then we'll go to Indiana.
Okay.
But Alabama had several strong tornadoes. The highest one was F2. No fatalities in Alabama. It wasn't quite as violent as Georgia. Georgia had a load of violent activity. You had the strong tornadoes through like Sumter and Pickens counties, Madison County, DeKalb, Etowah County. You've heard several of these counties a lot, of course, when listening to the Great James Span, of course.
Right.
It's like it's like when you hear the county, you instantly think of James Span when you're thinking.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's crazy, but it's really awesome though. But yeah, thankfully, a lot of these tornadoes were short-lived. The longest-lived tornado was a 17-mile path length of F1 intensity through Tallapoosa, Randolph County, through the morning hours of the 22nd. But once you got into Georgia, boy, it turned upside down really fast. Early on, you had a violent tornado that moved, started from Pine Mountain to Hickory Flat in Cobb and Cherokee counties, not too far from Atlanta. So moving through the northwest Atlanta suburbs. Yikes.
Yeah.
This tornado could have consisted of twin tornadoes, actually. So it struck and devastated Kennesaw, damaging or destroying more than 325 homes.
Oh, my.
And businesses in the city. A church in Woodstock was destroyed during the service, though. There were no fatalities. Thank goodness.
Wow.
That tornado. Yeah, especially all the damage it caused.
Sure.
Yikes. 20-mile path length. Then you had an F3 in Dahlonega. There was one fatality with this tornado. One person died from severe head injuries. You had on a large range, the tornado damaged or destroyed 40 structures, including offices, cabins, stables, and a lodge. This was in Lumpkin County, 10-mile path length. The deadliest tornado in Georgia would be more in central Georgia, near Etheridge to southeast of White Plains in Putnam and Greene counties. This happened in the late afternoon hours. A 32-mile path length, 5 fatalities. This was almost a mile wide in some places. White Plains was hit the hardest. 68 homes destroyed in Putnam County. 66 homes were destroyed in Greene County, and over 300 cattle were killed. So quite a lot of damage there, unfortunately. Then you had another deadly tornado. This was one of the longest track tornadoes in the outbreak. I think if memory serves me correct, this is the second longest track tornado of the outbreak. We'll get to one that was just highly impressive, but there might be some things about that are probably not true, but we'll get to that here
okay.
at the tail end of the podcast. Northeast of Amity to west of Jenkinsville, South Carolina. This was on the ground for 67 miles. No shock here because, the atmosphere was just ripe for tornadoes like this. This
sure.
happened toward the early nighttime hours. Only one fatality, though. Of course, with long-track tornadoes, the chances of having multiple fatalities goes way up, especially when you're talking it potentially hitting more bigger towns. But basically began near the Georgia-South Carolina border, moved northeast, hit 14 houses, 9 mobile homes, and 5 businesses destroyed. A parked car and truck were thrown from a garage to a nearby field. Frame house moved off its foundation. Many trees were downed. So, yeah, you had quite a lot of damage in Georgia. Of course, they were kind of right in the, I don't want to say sweet spot of the whole system in general, how it was lined up. But a lot of activity in the southeast. And, of course, before I move on to Indiana real quick, a point I want to kind of make. I think about this from time to time. It's like living in the southeast, it's kind of like, man, these people down here are seriously warriors. I don't know how they do it. It's like, well, when you get bad storms like that, it makes you kind of like builds a toughness within the community. It's like, no storm's going to drive me out of here. Hey, that's great. I'm glad that people, stick it out and whatnot, stick through it and whatnot, and call home. And it's incredible to see that the resilience of the Southeast is one that I can't even put into words.
Well, and for this case specific, or any that you talk about severe weather for sure, but same goes for hurricane season. I mean, think of some of these communities that there have been several, and I think that's the price you pay for the beauty of living along the ocean, right, or the convenience of living in a warmer climate, is that there is going to come some concerns with that and some dangers with that when it comes to weather. Your severe weather season is more numerous and potentially more severe as of now. You and I have talked about it in previous podcasts that while we were younger, the focus of, we'd always say the term Tornado Alley was the Central Plains. And I don't know if that's really kind of accurate anymore because of how frequent we see tornadoes now in the Southeast, specifically in Mississippi and Alabama. They're right up there with the Oklahomas and the Kansases of the world where you can get numerous major severe weather outbreaks. So you're right. It's credit to those people. Home's home, and so it's hard to leave that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's I don't want to go out and say, man, it's dangerous all the time, but it does seem like it is very active. And a lot of times you and I are talking about historical events. It's hard to not go through one of them and not mention the Southeast in most of them that we cover. Exactly.
And it's just, you feel bad for these people that go through it again and again, but like we say, it's for them, it's home. Of course, it does come with the potential of heightened danger. Just talking about what just happened recently, March 25th, that was awful. Gosh, that could have been even worse, which was scary.
Sure.
I just don't. That's hard to wrap my mind around that. Leading up to that day anyway, I was like, I don't know. Then I'm just like, oh, geez.
Right.
You're having that moment thinking, oh, gosh, no. But yeah, the toughness of the Southeast is one that I'm taken aback by it, and it's incredible. I'm glad to see that, people that, of course, just hang around and just stay tough with it. And as long as you have a plan, you're going to be just fine.
Sure.
And it's tough. Well, I know it's weird I say that, but it's true though. If you go, of course, you have your plan ready. Of course, if things go downhill and you have it all taken care of with the backup stuff, then you're just fine. And it's just how it goes. Life goes on and whatnot, and live through it. Life doesn't throw challenges at us for nothing. Make us stronger at the end of the day. So, oh boy, where do I start with this? Indiana. You want to talk about the
before you dive into Indiana, I think it's important to note this because you talked about the dynamics, right?
Yeah.
And I know this only tells part of the story, but I found this interesting. So I went back to the monthly climate data for the month of November, 1992.
Okay.
All right. So here it is. So November 20th, we had a high of 68. On the 21st, we had a high of 60. On the 22nd, we had a high of 65. And I know that's the day you're going to, specifically talk about. From there, Stephen, we went from 65 to 47.
Yep.
And so, I know that you need a lot more than just an extreme temperature change like that to have significant severe weather. But it also shows kind of the commonality of what we talked about last week, the November 17th outbreak, where it was extremely warm for the month of November. You had a lot of other things going on, but then following that, it got real windy and real cold real fast. And so that is part of the recipe when you're talking kind of those extremes in November of going back and forth, where your average high, specifically for Indiana, you should be in the upper 40s and low 50s around Thanksgiving, and your low should be near freezing. We're pushing close to 70 prior to this outbreak here in Indiana. That's not usual, and not always, but it is kind of it's a recipe for some bad things to come. And at least that weekend it was for sure.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned the numbers leading into the 22nd and afterwards, because this is what surprises me about this. So, me and you both know very, very well, here at the dear old state of Indiana, our setup usually with severe weather, if we have a severe weather threat, you're usually talking maybe higher shear, low cape. Of course, you have the winds aloft turning out of the south mainly from the surface and veering out of the west aloft. And unstable air that's not really high, but it's just enough there to be noticeable, being like, oh yeah, you have a little bit in there, you could have a severe threat, low end. This is one of those cases, except on November 22nd, 92, there was a lot of wind shear. We were literally one state over from the low, which only helped things out even further. And yeah, this is what kind of just this is a prime example of never let your guard down.
Right.
I'm looking on the Violent Tornado webpage, and that page does exist. Actually, I guess it definitely looks old. It hasn't been updated in a while.
Okay.
I didn't know it existed until someone tweeted about looking back on the 74 outbreak. I thought, I'm going to look into this, and I was looking through. There's different days and whatnot. You can look at data, and like there was a higher end risk eventually that slid up to I-70.
Okay.
Because of the shear alone, I'm assuming it had to have been the winds aloft, because the temperatures were not that warm. And I'm going to assume, too, it was probably cloudy, mostly cloudy on this day. Yeah, interesting for sure. But eventually, things got taken off just around 4 o'clock or so. The time change thing screws in my head. I try to do the math before daylight savings time happens, and I'm having down the timing back then. It's like, oh gosh, but
right.
Yeah, basically mid to late afternoons when things kicked off in Indiana. So you had in Monroe County an F3 near Ellettsville. This tornado for 3 houses, 7 mobile homes, and 3 barns. Worst damage being north of Ellettsville. Tornado destroyed 135 acres of corn as well. Now, interesting to know, Ellettsville just recently had an F2.
Right.
In 2018, and I remember, I don't know if it was my friend Jordan, one of my friends that went out to damage surveys with them. Some about that could have been F3 but it ended up being a 2. So that was kind of interesting. Kind of wanted to note that too, because Ellettsville just had the tornado recently there too. That day was also a high shear low cape day too. Right. Crazy. But then the activity really got kicked off. And Marcus, the amount of intense tornadoes that happened on this day in Indiana were like, that was something that took me back too a little bit. F3 in Fincastle struck about 50 farms. F3 northeast of Paragon, the 5 points in Morgan County. That was on the ground for 15 miles. The one in Fincastle was 12 miles. These weren't super long-lived, but they're on the ground long enough to cause some intense damage. And looking at old radar images, Marcus, these weren't really supercells.
Okay.
This was an intense line that turned into a more broken line of cells a little bit. Okay. Which is what's very interesting about this outbreak. Usually when you have a squall line through Indiana, you might get some weak tornadoes, especially if it constitutes that's kind of set up like April 8th, 2020. You have a tornado in Morrisville, and then you had several others down by Cincinnati. But on this day, it was different. These were much stronger tornadoes. You had then the F3, as you talked about, on the northeast side of Indy to Fishers, basically near Fishers, 9-mile path length, but it caused severe damage on the east northeast side of Indy. Right. So homes were destroyed. Many trees were downed at Fort Harrison. Fort Harrison's, of course, right just north of 56 near Lawrence. That's quite a cool park. Of course, I've been there a few times. Oh, yeah,
it's beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Very beautiful. Love it. I need to get back there sometime. It's
a really nice golf course over there, by the way.
I gotta do the golf course sometime.
Yeah.
Man. We disc golf near there. There's a place near there that I disc golf at. Which is really, but yeah, you're talking Fort Harrison got hit pretty hard.
Well, and that whole, people that aren't really familiar with Indianapolis, especially in the 90s, but even more so today, it's expanded. But then the north side of Indianapolis was booming, right? Everybody was flocking to the north side, and then stretching into Hamilton County, which you mentioned Fishers, which, is included in this path. Fishers, Carmel. Now, Carmel wasn't impacted, but it did stretch up into parts of Hamilton County, kind of got up close to the Geist area a little bit. This is a highly populated area. Even in the early 90s, it was in a quickly expanding area at that point. Now it's even much larger, much more populated now. We were kind of in the beginnings of that mass flood of people coming in to that northeast kind of corridor of the metro area there, just to kind of put that in perspective.
No wonder why the traffic's always so jam-packed up there these days on the weekend.
Right? Oh, hey, it's way better. Trust me. It is from a kid that grew up in Muncie, and we came down to Indianapolis a lot. So we were driving down I-69 a lot. It is way better now than it was back in the 80s and 90s. It was always a nightmare on the northeast side. Either coming or going. Didn't matter which way you're going. It was awful. It was awful. So it's still busy, but you can at least get through. It was more like a parking lot at times if you were trying to get to Castleton from Muncie sometimes.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I'll take your word for it, especially when you talk about the area booming. But, yeah, no, when you say that, too, and you're talking about an F3 tornado like this, which can cause some severe damage.
Absolutely.
Adding a whole level of, oh, geez, this could be bad. But thankfully, though, it did not hit many structures. It down a lot of trees, but still, at a major state park like Fort Harrison and whatnot. Then you had an F3 west of Shelbyville.
Right.
And this kind of, when looking at radar data, this was kind of turned into more of a broken line, it looks like.
Okay.
The way they did this on here is like they drew it kind of course, in 92 radars and stuff like that, where it was a lot different with the layout of across the country. But yeah, you had the F3 near west of Shelbyville, 10-mile path length, major damage near the town. Of course, recently there was just the two F1s by there. Of course, I came home and had to go back to work back at the end of July. But 3 houses, 5 barns, and many outbuildings were destroyed. A semi-truck was actually flipped on 74.
Okay, wow.
No fatalities, thankfully. There's F2s. Real quick, the town, I've never heard of this town.
Okay.
It has to be an unincorporated community. I was just talking about this with my aunt because I was telling her that I'm going to be doing this podcast with you and whatnot on this outbreak, which was quite intense. The town of Hardscrabble.
Not familiar with that. That's in Shelby County?
No, it's right on the border. It's technically in Madison County, but it's right on Hamilton-Madison County line, pretty much.
I've never heard of that. I mean, okay, so I'm looking on the map and I see where you're talking about. That's kind of near the Lapel area, basically. But I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's an unincorporated community from what I looked up. Hardscrabble.
Hardscrabble. Interesting.
I'm like, okay. And I literally said this. I'm like, okay, everything is going to be Hardscrabble now. I'm just kidding.
Right.
Nah. Everything that does not make sense is Hardscrabble. But you had an F2. When you search, every once in a while, you'll find some weird city name.
Hey, listen, I told you everybody's expanding to the north. I mean, that part of Madison County now is kind of it's because now, Carmel and Fishers and Noblesville are so heavily populated, it's starting to spill over a little bit to the east. And so you go directly east of there. You're in that Lapel area. You've got Fortville over there. So, hey, maybe within the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to have they'll get so populated, we'll have a Hardscrabble high school or something like that. How fun would that be?
If that, sign me on.
I'm in.
Goodness. we had to get a laugh at that real quick because the town is very unique. Hardscrabble, it's kind of it's so unique.
There you go.
You had a couple of other strong tornadoes, a couple F2s, one near Waynesburg and Bartholomew in Decatur County, another one near Gwenville, through Shelby Hancock Rush on the ground for 7.5 miles. And then the final strong, well, not really a final strong tornado in Indiana. There's one more I want to get to in a sec. One in the Liberty area in Union and Wayne County. It was on the ground for 12 miles. So several intense tornadoes, but thankfully, Marcus, no one was killed.
Okay.
So that and that's surprising because when you have temperatures in like the low mid 60s,
yeah,
and especially when it's in the fall, you're thinking, oh yeah, it's warmer than average, but then it's like, oh, I mean, maybe the local news stations that they were probably talking about thunderstorms and whatnot, and maybe a chance of severe weather, but you're not thinking of F3 tornadoes, like 5 of them especially, hitting some of these cities and whatnot. But again, though, thankfully no one was killed. There weren't too many. I don't think there were too many injuries, if I recall from. I think I really read anything on injuries. If there were, there probably were very few. But however,
there were 6 injuries. Is what I just saw.
Okay, thank you for the stat on that, Marcus.
Yeah.
There was one violent tornado though that actually was started northeast of Louisville by about probably, I'll say 30 minutes, 45 minutes northeast of Louisville, near the town of Worthville, Kentucky, and it actually went right up into Antioch, Indiana, basically right into Switzerland County, Indiana.
Well, so it crossed the Ohio River then.
Yeah, it was an F4, traversed a 27-mile path link. It did kill one person. It actually crossed the Ohio River twice, it says here, reaching maximum intensity in Carroll County, Kentucky. Debris from destroyed structures was found 5 miles away from where it originated. Mm-hmm. So Kentucky, a little bit of action there too. Ohio had an F3 in Preble and Dark counties, from Campbellstown to Arcanum, 20-mile path link. So the activity kind of carried in Ohio as well, just a little bit. And North Carolina had a deadly tornado near Hillsborough in Orange County, North Carolina. So quite a lot of destruction in lots of areas across the country, Marcus.
Yeah.
One interesting tidbit of information that I always find this to be interesting because of the circumstances of this day. So my parents, not yet married at the time, but they've been together at this point for 5 years, actually 5.5 years. I couldn't tell you how long they were on vacation for, but they decided to go down to Tennessee. And on this day, November 22nd, they were like, okay, let's get back home. They were driving back home in the middle of all this. Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell you the proximity they were from the F4 from. I know they were doing. They were driving on 65, of course, and of course that line of storms went over 65, and of course the damage. But yeah, they were driving home on that day in the middle of the outbreak while you have deadly tornadoes happening just south in Georgia of you, and it's kind of wild. They were kind of like. What's weird too is I don't think. Let me go ahead and look at this real quick. Tennessee, I don't think even had a single tornado reported on this day. One in Southwest Tennessee, but Tennessee had hardly any storm reports. Same with Kentucky, except for of course the F4 in far northern Kentucky. But it's kind of weird. My parents were spared from all the crazy activity.
Right.
It's kind of wild. I mean, you had all the destruction happening just south of you, then just happening now north of you. And they're kind of like right in the middle of it.
Sure.
Right in the pit of it. But yeah, I couldn't tell you what time they were heading back. My dad doesn't remember, but he said, yeah, they were driving back from Tennessee on that day. So I was just kind of like, wow, that's
man.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It is crazy. And at the time too, my parents only lived about 20 minutes south, about 15, 20 minutes south of the F3 that hit Fort Harrison. So it kind of was a close call.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, I think, and going back to that here, just because, I mean, obviously we're based out of Indianapolis with this podcast, that it does amaze me, with an F3 strength. That's strong, right?
Yes.
Going into any part of Indianapolis, it's populated, right? Doesn't matter if it's north, south, east, or west. I mean, I mentioned that the north side was pretty packed in. I mean, they all are. But there's so many homes and businesses, and I remember in the early 90s, just, I because I grew up in Muncie, and Muncie is north, that, anytime we ever came outside of going to like a Pacers or Colts game, going to downtown, we were on the north side of Indianapolis if we were going to the mall or anything like that. So I was just much more familiar at that younger age with the north side of Indianapolis. The fact that there were minor injuries, and while there were several homes that were damaged, that there were no fatalities out of that is pretty impressive, considering the travel path of that tornado, that it went through a major city like Indianapolis. It wasn't the outskirts, it was legit in the city that it had rolled on, and it was on the ground for 9 miles. That's pretty considerable there.
It is. And this just goes to show that Indianapolis, not vulnerable to tornadoes. Like, you think a lot of people back in the day, especially, downtown areas can't get hit. Many major downtown areas have disproven of this myth. Louisville, for instance, I just talked about back in the late 1800s, or like Birmingham, OKC, Topeka, any like St. Louis especially. My goodness, they've been hit how many times by an F4 tornado? Several. Twin Cities. Again with the north side, thankfully, again, though, the tornado was basically more in I don't want to say rural area, but it hit an area that didn't have many people in it and whatnot. It just kind of how things kind of worked out with Indiana that day. It's a godsend. Something like what we talked about last week when we kind of talked about how everyone was at church when the Washington tornado happened.
That's right.
It kind of goes back to that, in my opinion, with this. Okay. But yeah, thankfully, though, again, no fatalities, a few minor injuries. But then you go into the 23rd, you're basically pretty much tail into the outbreak. Mm-hmm. There was one more, and I mean this, and here's the thing, again, this is disputed. We'll probably never exactly know. You never know, because, of course, with even better research and whatnot and studies, you never know. Some things get figured out over time. But in North Carolina, and this actually started, it looks like real early in the day, like, what was it, looks like 4 or 5 in the morning.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Basically started from north of Barclaysville to north of Elizabeth City. I am seeing 11 counties on here in this path length. This 160 miles.
Wow.
This was the longest track tornado ever documented in North Carolina. However, this may have been a tornado family that was improperly surveyed by inexperienced surveyors. So there's a bit of a catch there with that.
Okay.
At its max intensity, it was F3. It caused F2, F3 damage along the majority of the path and impacted the Wilson and Elizabeth City areas.
So now, wait, when you say that, do you think that this was a situation where it may have come from the same storm but lifted?
Yeah.
A few times?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically like one storm, but like a family of tornadoes with that same storm.
Gotcha, okay.
There's a similar, like with for example, here's a good example of this. The Candlestick Park tornado back in March in 1966.
Okay.
That was a devastating F5 that ripped right pretty much through part of Jackson, killed 58 people. To this day, though, it still stands as one track of, gosh, I can't believe I'm about to say this number, 202 miles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But they think there's even some eyewitness accounts potentially of that first tornado lifting and on F2 dropping near there, but leaves a gap of one person being killed in Neshoba County, I think, in that area. But to this day, though, it still stands as one track, although there's talk that it could have been actually 2 tornadoes, but still. And the images of the tornado, ugly.
Sure.
There. I mean, one of the ugliest tornadoes I've seen in terms of a photo, literally. It's not, in my opinion, not quite for the faint of heart. If you're afraid of tornadoes, I personally wouldn't look at this image, but so basically, that's kind of the one I've used as an example of even with the Monticello tornado in 1974, the first tornado actually was. And I remember I just went to Indy and ChaserCon, and Sam Lashley from the National Weather Service in Indy, the warning coordination meteorologist from NWS Indy was talking, and he brought up this tornado and talk about Fujita studying it. It was actually, I think, like with the first tornado-ish or whatnot, it was something along the lines more of maybe just maybe of a microburst or something like that.
Okay.
If I recall. But of course, you had the tornado was actually had a path length of 105 miles instead of like 120 originally.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. So yeah, that's a little bit of a different of a case. But with this though, like I talked about with Candlestick Park, one storm, possibly multiple tornadoes. But a school bus weighing 28,000 pounds was picked up and carried more than 75 yards, injuring 21 students with the tornado that happened in North Carolina. Amazingly, nobody was killed.
Wow.
Yeah, you're talking early in the morning.
Sure.
I mean, usually that does not end well with certain areas, but thankfully in this case, though, nobody was killed. Overall, though, again, there were 26 fatalities in this outbreak. That's actually shockingly low for 1992 and the intensity of the tornadoes, but that's great, though. It's amazing how low the death toll was for an outbreak of this caliber, because usually outbreaks like this, they produce way more than 26 fatalities. Usually you're thinking double the number or triple the number possibly.
Sure.
But yeah, and I know for you, Marcus, you didn't know too much about this event, and I remember I had asked before we started this podcast episode up that you don't remember much about this day. Of course, I asked because of course I know like where you were living at the time, nothing really happened there. So it's
right.
You kind of don't remember stuff that doesn't really happen in your area. It's kind of how it usually is with people. But that's just how it is. That's just nature of society. But this was quite a unique outbreak, Marcus. And I think about this one quite a bit when I think about November stuff, because it's like, yeah, at any point, things can kind of go off the rail if you have a setup that it just, you always keep your guard up. Even a lower threat day, I've been hit on the chin pretty much with this lesson twice already this year. With working at Wish of June 25th and July 29th.
Sure.
I've been hit square on the chin twice.
Yeah.
Don't count out a severe threat. It's like, Steven, get in your head now. You stop it. Quit saying it ain't gonna happen.
Right.
Even if your own dad is telling you to dress up,
that's right. You probably should. That's right. Gotta always be ready. Well, and here's the thing. Again, just kind of going back to in November. I mean, obviously, I've got my own personal experience, which I talked at length with last week about November 17th.
Yeah.
So I have justification for November making me nervous, but just looking at the temperature profile for that entire month, what concerns me as an on-air meteorologist, right? Mm-hmm. Where our main job is just to convey the message of, hey, there's a chance for significantly severe weather, yada, yada. So on the 5th and the 6th of November, that month, that year, we had, it looked like some flurries. We had highs only in the 30s. They actually had 1.2 inches of snow on the 7th. So I know that that's kind of separated out, but there were also several more days where there was a little bit of snow reported prior to that day. In fact, as early as the 15th, they had flurries reported before, so that's less than a week, or about a week from when the tornado occurred in central Indiana. So my point being that, I know how people work, especially around here, that when you start kind of flipping that switch to cold and snow, I think a lot of people have then turned that, well, we're not going to have severe weather guard off. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that, that probably was the case, with the November 17th outbreak. I'm sure it was probably even more so in 92, just because you don't have the technology there. We don't have social media to get the word out and try to explain it in depth. You got your information weather-wise from either the TV or the radio. Exactly. I mean, the internet wasn't even a big thing in the early 90s. You couldn't go to weather.gov or anything like that. So,
right.
the main source of getting that information was through the traditional forms of media, which was television and radio. And so if you weren't paying attention to that, then you probably had no idea what was coming down the pipe, which also is, again, astounding that we limited the amount of injuries and we had no fatalities in our state, considering the magnitude of the tornadoes that did occur that day.
Exactly. And yeah, again, like we talked about, it goes to show we've come a long way since 92. But again, like I said before, there are some things that could be worked on. And with outbreaks like this, when you talk about like the changes that happen in November, you always got to watch out for that stuff.
Right.
Pattern kind of flips suddenly like that. Yeah, it can get dicey. It can. November, makes me a little nervous too. It's like every few Novembers something happens. 2002. 02 was not quite, like, really not really Indiana. It was Ohio and Tennessee, Alabama, but still, those are prime examples of it's just, yeah. You always want to be aware. You don't want to have your guard down. And like you talked about with the form of media, it's crazy how it's expanded these days.
Sure.
Of course, you're limited to TV and whatnot and radio. Now we've gone way beyond that. We're talking, of course, now the internet and whatnot. And but yeah, media still is always going to be like basically the form of television. Still will always be like the main form of getting the information that you need. But like with the internet now, it's like it makes it so much better. I mean, take it as you wish with that, with certain things.
Well, I mean, we could go on a 30 to 60 minute long debate on that. But yes, I agree. Especially when it comes to severe weather, it can be extremely, extremely useful, no doubt.
Absolutely, and that's what's incredible about saving lives and whatnot. But again, though, with the death toll being low with this outbreak is it's a surprising but great thing, though. But yeah, quite a look through with this outbreak, Marcus. It's great talking to you about this stuff. Kind of look back on what was a widespread outbreak. It
was. And then, and it's fascinating because now today, I don't know if we've had back-to-back weeks where we've talked about severe weather outbreaks on the podcast, and it's fascinating. We do it in the month of November. And again, it just goes to show, tornadoes can happen any time of the year. And so you always need to be prepared. And even if it snowed 2 weeks prior, it doesn't mean that we're not going to flip the switch. We can go back and forth quite a bit. Just to kind of close things out here real quick, Stephen, I wanted to go back really quick to the mobile home stat that I mentioned. I mentioned mostly in Mississippi.
Yeah.
The whole event, I'm looking on this tornado talk here. The whole event, there were 26 fatalities.
Yes.
And 14 of the 26 happened in mobile homes. 15 of the 26 were in Mississippi. Not mobile homes specifically, but just 15 of those fatalities were in Mississippi. 14, though, happened in mobile homes. 14 of the 26. So over half of the people that died that day were in mobile homes. So... yeah. Again, I know we sound like a broken record, but if you live in a mobile home, nothing wrong with that, but it just does not offer you protection in severe weather events. And we will drive that home until you're completely tired of hearing it. But if your community does not have a shelter, you need to find a place that's nearby that would offer you protection if the event occurs that you need to take your tornado precautions.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's not really a broken record. And to your point, it's like we don't say it repeatedly just to annoy you. We say it because we care. We don't want you to die. I mean, we want you to live to see another day. And it's the mobile home. It can get completely torn apart. Even in an EF2 tornado, it could be destroyed. I mean, it reminds me a little bit to Easter Sunday. I don't want to go too long about this, but it kind of reminds me of a bit like that. Last year, when you have a host of challenges, obviously the pandemic and whatnot, and there's talk of no shelters opening up until the last second, basically when they're like, okay, we'll open some up. And I'm thinking to myself, Oh my gosh, I feel like we're in a losing battle already. We haven't even freaking started this outbreak yet, and it's one of the rare feelings. I'm thinking this is going to be really bad. This is going to be really bad. Mm-hmm. This whole system is going to pack a really ferocious punch I haven't seen in a long time. And sure enough, it does. Once the cap broke, and that's the lid for storm development the lid to hinder storm development and whatnot, tries to, of course. Once that broke in southern Mississippi, it was freaking over. I mean, the tornado that happened near Bassfield, I've said this a couple times on here, that is the most violent tornado I have tracked in real time on radar.
Sure.
Flat out. And I see images of this thing and how huge it was. I thought, yeah, I don't know if everyone made it through this tornado. I'm not trying to be like that kind of person who loses hope and faith, but when you're talking a tornado like that, that's probably producing EF5 level winds, and I said it at one point too. That's probably the only time I've ever said that. I'm thinking, looking at velocities, this is probably producing EF5 winds to the surface, and it could have easily been an EF5. I personally think it was, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. We're talking homes that are not quite as built well, and they're just completely destroyed. And then you're talking, I don't think there were many mobile homes in this path hit. I have no idea. Okay. I know some were just devastated. Like Sosa was devastated by this tornado. There was a tornado in northern Georgia later that night. Was among the deadliest of the outbreak. It was only an EF2, but what made it so deadly, hit a mobile home park in farther than Georgia.
Right.
Too far from where one of my best friends lives. He was just a couple counties south of that, and I was warning him ahead of time. I'm thinking, yeah, get ready, it might be really bad, and sure enough, it was. And again, you got to make sure, especially in a challenging time like that, and of course, still kind of are. Tornado safety comes first. That's the immediate threat. Of course, then two, you're talking the virus and whatnot. You got to, of course, protect yourself from others as well at that point. And that's where you can get even bigger challenges. But again, tornado safety always important because the tornado is the immediate threat. But again, we don't hammer the message home like that just to annoy you guys. We care about you.
That's right.
We're all family friends here at the end of the day.
That's right.
And we want you to live. I couldn't imagine being in a tornado and getting tossed around like that. I mean, you're talking violent winds. You're being thrown around by violent winds like that. I cannot imagine having to feel that.
Well,
seriously.
No, I mean, and that's the thing, and why we always say site build houses. If you're not securely on a foundation, you're already off to a bad start.
Exactly.
So, and again, there's no judging there. It's just you need to find when you get into a situation that you need to find a safer spot to be when it comes to severe weather. And that's not just confined to tornadoes, but damaging straight line wind events as well. The wind is wind. Doesn't matter if it's going in a circle, if it's going in a straight line. Either one can be, destructive. So
it can be. Yeah, and also too, here's a good point too. If you don't feel the slightest bit of comfortable in your place, you think your friend or relative's place now down the road or whatnot's safer, go for it. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to make that move. I know it's your home and whatnot, and you don't want to leave home, but if you do not feel even the slightest bit of safe in sheltering from a potentially maybe a violent tornado, make that move.
Yep.
Make the move. You'll definitely thank yourself later for it. Trust me. Always trust your gut instinct.
That's right. All right, Stephen, thank you for your time. Real quick before we let you go, if people have questions or want to reach out to you, that's the best way to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marcus, for having me on. I'm on Facebook. My page name is Stephen Deanna WX. I'm on Twitter at Stephen Deanna WX. My first name has a V in it. And on Instagram, you can hit me up, all lowercase, Stephen D_WX98. So yeah, I'm on all three. As James Spence says it, the Facebook, Twitter, and
So when is the Stephen Deanna TikTok account getting started? That's the big question.
Oh gosh, I will probably never have TikTok. I will say I do see some funny things on there.
Yeah. There's some good stuff on there. There's some good stuff. All right.
We'll see. I'm going to update for you after when I got one.
Well, you let me know. I'll be waiting with bated breath.
I got you, Marcus. But hey, thank you again.
Yeah,
Thank
man.
you again for having me on. Always great talking about this stuff with you. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. All right, we're going to have your Thanksgiving week forecast coming up next here on Weather Weekly. All right, here's a look at the forecast week of November 22nd. It is Thanksgiving week, and as this podcast drops, it comes down on the busy travel day, Wednesday, which across the Midwest and really across much of the country, no major issues. I don't think we're going to have any significant airport delays in terms of weather. You know, there could be certainly other things involved, but I don't think weather's going to play a big role in any major travel delays here for this Wednesday. In terms of Thanksgiving, across the Midwest, not the prettiest of days. We got a pretty decent cold front that's going to come through here, and it's going to provide us with some rain chances, it looks like, at least for the first half of your Thanksgiving. So it could be a wet morning. Those of you that do the smoking of the turkeys or deep fry, you may have to prepare for some rain in the morning. Just be aware of that, especially here in central Indiana. Numbers are going to be running cool, but kind of typical for Thanksgiving, upper 40s to around 50 degrees. We're hopeful that that rain kind of moves on out as we head into the latter portions of the day. So hopefully not the entire day being a washout. Black Friday should be dry. If you're heading out shopping, it's going to be chilly in the morning, mid-20s here across much of our state here in Indiana, and highs only into the mid-30s. Looks like we'll bounce back a little bit heading into the weekend, lower 40s, still a little below average. But it should be dry for Saturday and Sunday, and then heading back to work on Monday. Also looks quiet with numbers into the low 40s. Overall pattern looks to be fairly quiet here, at least over the next 8 days, with the exception of, again, the holiday, unfortunately, looks to be a little bit on the soggy side. The 8 to 14 day outlook, actually not bad, as we put the wraps up on the month of November and head into early December, the first 5 days. Above average temperatures and near normal precipitation there. And the 1 month outlook, which is valid for the month of December right now, equal chances of either going above or below temperature, and same thing, equal chances for either above or below average precipitation as well. So basically, what that's saying, there's a lot of question marks when we go into the month of December. We're still a little bit out to kind of detect what kind of patterns are going to start settling in as we start rolling into the month of December. So something worth watching for you. Have a great Thanksgiving. Thanks for joining us here. We appreciate it on episode number 41 of Weather Weekly. And we'd love to hear your feedback. If you got any ideas that you want to hear for the podcast, we'd love to hear those as well. You can email me anytime, marcus.bailey@wishtv.com. You can also hit me up on social media, Facebook, Marcus Bailey Weather, or on Twitter and Instagram @MarcusBailey. Again, enjoy your holiday week and weekend, and we'll see you back here next week, next Wednesday, for another episode of Weather Weekly. And while you're here, make sure to check out all the other great podcasts, all part of the All Indiana Podcast Network. We'll talk to you next week.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com, and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.